Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the October 21st, 2022 meeting of the Pima County Election Integrity Commission. Commissioner DeLarge, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call. Commissioner Atkins.
Present.
Commissioner DeLarge.
Here.
Commissioner Mace.
Present.
Commissioner Hurley.
Present.
Commissioner Tellman.
Here.
Commissioner Helen.
Here.
Welcome. Commissioner Kirshen.
Here.
Commissioner King.
Present.
The chair is here. Director Hargrove is not here. I assumed not yet. Is she coming? Okay, since she's most of the agenda. Next item on the agenda is call of the public. Just because we're in the Board of Supervisors meeting room doesn't mean we function like the Board of Supervisors does. We have neither the staff nor the knowledge to be able to do that. I do have 5 people that have either submitted their name or filled out a request. We will go through those people first, and if there's anybody else in the audience that would like to speak, we will pick you up that time on a collegial basis. You do have 3 minutes to speak. The little lights don't work. That's a piece of the technology that we don't have, but I do have a 3-minute timer up here. I will let you know when your 3 minutes are up. And the first person on my list is Peter Norquist. And if you would give us your name and where you're from for the record.
When you say where I'm from, what do you mean more specifically? I'm a citizen of Tucson in Pima County, and my name is Peter Norquist, as you just mentioned. So thank you very much. Good morning, members of the Commission. Today I want to begin by listing some recent points of concern in Arizona, which have been reported since early ballots began to be mailed out at the beginning of this week. There have already been reports from Maricopa County of ballot stuffing in drop boxes. Perpetrators have been documented covering or otherwise obscuring their license plates when in the act. As many as 6,000 ballots in Pinal County are being reported as only partially complete, with federal races listed but local races, including school board elections, missing due to an alleged voter registration error. Postal workers in Pima County are reporting hundreds of ballots which appear to be machine damaged and are being delivered opened and mangled without being placed in proper protective sleeves. These damaged ballots, if taken to voting centers, are, in my understanding, likely to be replaced with provisional ballots, which would then be subject to the adjudication process behind closed doors. With that noted, I wish to return to the topic of our voting infrastructure. The Board of Supervisors have been informed that our current election equipment is not certified per the HAVA Act of 2002, Category 3, as codified into Arizona statutes. See the revised statute Title 16-442B. It requires testing by a federally accredited laboratory. 10X Software Solutions, a vendor who is apparently acting in large part as our de facto elections director, has falsely advertised that its Precinct Central has been certified by National Testing Systems and SLI compliance, but evidence on SLI has been provided to the Board of Supervisors and the Elections Department that this is not true. The act of using uncertified machines in violation of law for our elections makes every vote processed by these machines an illegal vote. Thus, no election using our machines since they were last properly certified, including the 2020 and subsequent elections, is legally or constitutionally valid, meaning that all officials elected during this period are usurping their seats, and their appointments are therefore invalid as well, whether they realize it or not. I would think that this should be an issue of immediate concern for this commission, and the fact that it has gone unaddressed is deeply troubling. Ms. Hargrove indicated at the last DIC meeting that it was too late to make any significant infrastructure changes which address the public's concern with election infrastructure. This may be understandable from a practical point of view, but it is egregious from an ethical point of view. I've been getting a strong feeling in the past months that there's an attitude held among those who subscribe to certain narratives that vote manipulation and fraud may not be a particular area of concern, as long as it benefits the parties who are assumed to be the right ones, whose narratives these results support. This is, of course, a completely subjective position, which the election system should be designed to constrain, not to facilitate. I'm quickly losing faith that there is any will on the part of our representatives, whether alleged, elected, or appointed, to fulfill their duties to safeguard our elections in any truly meaningful way. Nevertheless, it is our duty as citizens to place this information into the public record so that you are relieved of any plausible deniability regarding maladministration, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. Thank you for your time and attention.
Welcome, thank you. Tim Laux.
Good morning. My name is Tim Laux. I am a Pima County resident. By the way, to follow up on Peter, this is the first page of the Tenex proposal that shows the NTS there. Invalid, not good, not worthwhile. So I read all of the after-action reports, a great deal of overlap with them. What was missing entirely, of course, was the fact that there's a lack of certification. Now, the county recorder uses different software than elections. County recorder uses a homegrown version. I'm banging on them about I want to see the certification from the Secretary of State. They've referred me to page 84 in the 2019 Secretary of State Elections Manual, which has nothing to do with anything having to do with waivers or certification whatsoever. The very first chapter, or I'm sorry, the very first sentence of Chapter 4 states in the Elections Manual, all components of a voting system must be properly certified prior to use in any election for a federal, state, or county office. Reference is made to, once again, ARS 16442B. When I wrote to the Recorder's Office and asked to see the certification, as I said already, they referred me to page 86 of the manual, which again has nothing to do with it. In Chapter 4, Section 3, Item B2, it states that electronic voting systems may not be connected to the Internet, any wireless communication device, or any external network except for e-poll books. And I will remind you that, again, the county recorder uses different software. They connect Bluetooth to a printer, and they are connected somehow to the centralized database here in Tucson. Elections has hired a Tenex employee to monitor Delta file transfers. Again, Chapter 4B, Item 4 states that devices may not contain remote access software or any capability to remotely access the system. E-poll books are part of the system. And if we have a Tenex employee monitoring Delta files, that implies that they're inside our e-poll books. Completely illegal. The cloud database is also part of the system, and the only way to access it is through the Internet. Therefore, using a vendor DBA and a Tenex project manager goes against the 2019 Elections Manual. Strangely enough, all the words written by this body and any other after-action report never once stated the above, in spite of people like me protesting its use. Article 3 of your bylaw states that the Pima County Election Integrity Commission is chartered as an advisory group reporting to the Pima County Board of Supervisors. The purpose is to help improve the conduct of elections by examining the system and processes behind them in order to improve function of any public trust in Pima County. I'm almost done here. From my point of view, by not specifically telling the Board of Supervisors the system you're actually about all of the illegality, excuse me, it's not my eye, you actually are condoning the use of the county recorder's homegrown software and the Tenex system. And I'm still awaiting to see the Delta file transfer logs, Constance. I hope that you are willing to address that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Schaefer.
I don't see him.
Not here yet.
Jim O'Connor.
I don't think
Gisela Aaron.
Good morning. My name is Gisela Aaron. I live in Tucson, and I would like to notify you, and on October 4th, we gave notice to the Pima County Board of Supervisors, and you are being notified now that the election equipment and machines that are currently being used in Arizona in all 15 counties are not legally certified as required by state law. Arizona chose to incorporate into their statutes ARS 16442B the third category of 4 options, and the State Voting System Certification Process, Category 3 of the Help America Vote Act of 2002. It requires testing by a federally accredited laboratory. Mr. Schaefer, who owns a testing lab in Arizona and is a subject matter expert, gave evidence on October 4th to the Board of Supervisors that SLI compliance testing is out of compliance. We found certificates were fudged from 2-year accreditation, which is legal, to 3 years. Signature of the executive director, Mr. Brian Newberry, was implied, but he had left the company prior to the extension of 3 years on the certificate. So certification is for 2 years. It always happens the year prior to election, and that's the same schedule as the election procedure manual, as you may know. I have evidence that NTS Huntsville is no longer in compliance either. Here is a letter from NTS Huntsville operation dated March 13, 2017, notifying the U.S. Election Assistance Commission that they were voluntarily withdrawing from their role and responsibility as an independent voting system testing lab, VISTL, at the end of March 2017. The Secretary of State and her staff should have looked immediately for another federally accredited testing lab. She chose to neglect her important requirement, her duties, her job duties. You are now put on notice, and this makes the 2019 City Council election 2020, and if you choose to use these machines in 22, invalid, null, void. Do not use these non-certified, unlawful election machines. You, as the advisory board, can make recommendations not to use the machines, or you can advise the board to do a 100% hand count immediately after the election to promote voter trust and election integrity. Please choose wisely. I have the paperwork here to submit to you. And if Ms. Hargrove mentioned ARS 16442 F and G, I looked them up. They are for experimental use only, and if we choose to use 10X, fine, but you know, in 6 months, the emergency certification shall be limited or shall be done, and then we have to turn in 10X and ship it back or no longer use it. So we spent $2 million on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to submit my paperwork. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Bickle, for this opportunity, since I didn't submit by 3 p.m. yesterday.
Quite welcome.
With this opportunity, I had printed out House Bill 2839 yesterday. I haven't had a chance to read through it completely. Perhaps during the course of this meeting, the Commission can address it. My understanding of it is that in early March of this year, it was introduced and signed by the governor all in one day, so it was done as an emergency. Section 4 of HB 2839 states, for the 2022 election cycle, precinct committeemen County Party Committee, Board of Supervisors. The candidates for PCs, I'm just going to read it from this article that this is Rusty Bowers. But the article states that HB 2839 clarified the calculation as well as some of the requirements for the filling statements of interest, nomination papers, and nomination petitions from candidates for election in 2022. But many of the 85 lawmakers who voted for it, it was unanimous, not one dissent, apparently did not read the full bill or the summary fact sheet, and if they had, they would have known Section 4 of the bill drastically changed how political party precinct committeemen will get into office in 2022. While most PC candidates would be happy to skip signature gathering, the new law entirely removes voters from the process for 2022. Instead, full authority has been given to the political party's local county committee to decide who the candidate will be for each precinct committeeman position. I am a PC for a political party here in Pima County, and I guess because I haven't had a chance to read through the whole thing, I'm not really clear on it. But that aside, since we are less than 3 weeks away from a general election here in Pima County, I would really like to impart, as a military veteran myself, that how our election integrity has really gone off the rails in the United States of America, and here in Pima County for sure. I think back to the May 2006 RTA rigged special election. That if this was a military operation and we can't change course quickly, knowing that it's going to be a failed election, everyone would die on the battlefield. The troops wouldn't make it. So I just hope you consider that. I mean, we need to do some critical thinking. We need to be able to change on a dime. If not, it's like heading over the cliff. And I really appreciate the time given to me this morning to express my views. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the gallery that would like to address the commission?
Michael Schaefer sent me his statement. May I read it?
You may not. You can hand it to me if you have a printed copy of it. You can send it to the commission. Yes.
I also understand the corporate commissioner wrote the statement to you. You may not have seen it yet. He wrote it yesterday.
I haven't seen it. I don't know if anybody else on the commission has seen it. No. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of the 2022 meeting summaries. I believe those were published.
Yes, those are online.
Anybody have any additions, changes, or deletions to the meeting summaries? And I might emphasize here the word summaries rather than minutes. The minutes are the video recording. The summaries are just an easy way for us to find what's available in the recording. Hearing no objection. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question, Mr. Chair? No. Okay.
No. Hearing none, the summary stand approved as presented. Status update on general election preparations, the Elections Department and the Recorder. Ms. Hargrove, or Director Hargrove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Pima County Elections Department passed the logic and accuracy testing from the Secretary of State on October 7th. So the voting equipment has been tested for the election, the scanners and the express votes. So the voting system for the election has been tested, and it passed on October 7th. The Elections Department started receiving turnover of early ballots this week from the Recorder's Office. We are in the process of now having the early board go through, verify those affidavits, open the ballots, and get them ready for processing or duplication. And duplication is scheduled for next week, but the schedule is posted on our webpage for anybody who wants to see the schedule of when we are processing and when duplication is going to happen. As a reminder, sample ballots will be available on demand in vote centers for this election, so we're not posting all of the ballots this election, but anyone who wants to receive a ballot can request one and have one printed for them at the vote center. We will be posting the full text insert of the propositions on in each vote center on election day. The staff are currently working on editing ballot PDFs so that we can post them on the website for sample ballots for individuals who are looking for those on the website. That is in process. Poll worker training is ongoing. Training classes are smaller and specific to the role of the poll worker, and it is very important that individuals attend the correct class as well as get their own time, because there's a lot of information that we have to impart to them, and if they show up late, they're going to miss a great part of that information. So that is ongoing. The poll worker manual is complete, is posted on our website, and anyone who has already attended training, we are mailing those the manual, it's not manuals anymore, it is one manual, out to them. I want to thank, and I won't call out any names, but members of the public inspectors and others for assisting with the updating and editing of the poll worker manual. There's been a lot of cooperation and input between parties and the inspectors in getting that updated and ready for the election. Let's see. Okay, programming and testing of e-poll books are underway. The production file and ballots are currently being loaded onto the electronic poll books. Once those are loaded, each vote center unit will go through a logic and accuracy test. After testing, staff will pack the printers and cradle points for deployment. However, they will put the electronic poll books in a charging cart, which allows them to power on and receive any updates from the recorder's office, poll worker updates that we do between now and the time that we deploy them. So that is in process. Just as an update and clarification, the office does not have a project manager. We did not hire a project manager for this election because there just wasn't time within 3 weeks to find somebody with the qualifications that we need to have them actually serve as a project manager. So we already had a process in place that we're moving forward with that process and making sure that everything is ready to go out to the vote centers on election day. We do have a project manager from 10X, which is normal with an implementation that we continue to work with. They're not here locally, but we continue to work with them in meetings to make sure that we're coordinating between the recorder's office, 10X, and my office. There also is not a specific individual that will just only monitor Delta files on election day. The individual will monitor the election like they did before, with the added responsibility of making sure that we are monitoring those Delta files as they go up and down as they continue. That actually will start prior to the election, because any updates from the recorder's office or any poll worker updates that we do are actually considered a Delta file. So we will begin monitoring that process as it is ongoing now. So as soon as any updates are made, I'm not sure when the recorder's office will provide any additional updates, but I think they've completed all of the processing the applications, voter registration applications for this election, and that will be updated, as well as the early ballots that they continue to process and in their early voting locations. All of that information is an update to the voter registration list, and it is ongoing. And so as they update, we will monitor that to make sure that it looks okay before deployment. Okay. So that is all of that. And I just wanted to read the definition of a voting system, since we're talking about voting systems, electronic poll books. A voting system is defined, and this is the state of Arizona, this is not federal government. A voting system is defined as the total combination of mechanical, electromechanical, or electronic equipment, including the software, firmware, and documentation required to program, control, and support the equipment that is used to define ballots, cast and count votes, report or display election results, and maintain and produce any audit trail information. Thus, a voting system consists of the electronic voting equipment, including central count equipment, precinct voting equipment, and accessible voting equipment, and the election management system used to tabulate ballots. So the 850s, the scanners that we have, is considered a part of the voting system. The election and management system, for those of you who have had the opportunity to observe in the counting room, is the server that we use and the software that we use to define program ballots as well as tabulate results. And the Express Vote accessible marking device, which is required by the Help America Vote Act, is a part of that system. Electronic poll books are outside of that system as defined by the state and, of course, the federal government. So they are not subject to the same testing that the voting equipment is subject to. Just for clarification, and anyone can go to the websites and read that information. Electronic poll books are subject to voluntary testing, if that is what they do, subject to voluntary testing, but the state of Arizona does not actually certify electronic poll books. And that is my update, and if you have any questions.
Any questions from anybody? Commissioner Hurley.
You mentioned the e-poll books. Once you get your systems all checked out, you're going to package up the printers and things like that. And I think I heard you say you're going to leave the e-poll books, or the e-poll books, plugged into their cradles so that they can get updates continuously. Is that what I heard?
Commissioner Hurley, that is correct. So we are leaving them charging. As long as they power on, they can receive any updates from the recorder's office.
But these aren't going to be used until November 8th, right? So why would we leave them plugged into the internet for that period of time? I mean, we all know that the longer you're connected to the internet, the more opportunities there are for mischief happening. Why wouldn't we just plug them in a day or so? Whenever, at some point, the recorder has to, I don't know, certify whatever, the database that's going to be used on November 8th, correct?
Commissioner Hurley, that is correct. So the way that works is that with the voter registration deadline, they complete as much of that data entry as they can. Then they create a production database, which we then download. However, if there are additional voter registration applications that need to be processed or updates, as well as the early ballot processing, that all still needs to happen, and they need to be updated to the electronic poll books.
I guess I'm not following this. It seems to me like you need to load the poll books one time, just prior to deploying them out to the voting centers. Is that so? Why would there be continuous updates going on right now? I guess is that right? So why would we continually have these things hooked up to an internet wireless? Right?
Yes, sir. So in a perfect world, Commissioner Hurley, we would keep the electronic poll books until the day before the election and then get them out to the vote centers. However, that does not happen. It would be difficult to happen right prior to the election. And so there has to be an update because early voting does not end until they have emergency voting up until the Sunday prior to the election. And so as individuals' ballots are processed, we have to update the voter registration database.
Okay.
Because if we do not, then, of course, their ballots, it will show that they were just issued a ballot, and with the new law, they would then be able to cast a ballot in the vote center. And so in order for these Delta files and files to upload, then we have to make sure that we're allowing them, turning on these devices so that they can receive any additional updates that they need.
All right. Well, again, this is old news. This is not the system we were sold back a year ago, or not quite a year ago, when we were describing how the system was going to work. So just make that point there.
Commissioner King.
Thank you, Ms. Hargrove. The question I have for you is, you talked about voter registration updates. The cutoff for voter registration was the 11th of October. Why would the recorder be still continuing to process voter registration updates? That would be out of date for this election, correct?
Commissioner King, the way that it works is, of course, the voter registration deadline is a point in time, but they still have lots of applications that come in that meet that deadline, and so they still have to process those applications.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Tillman.
Just a clarification, you said the devices will be plugged in ahead of time. How much ahead of time are they plugged in? And are they plugged in at the election center and then moved, or are they plugged in at the voting center?
Commissioner Tillman, thank you. That is a great question. No, they are actually at our office, so we have not deployed any devices, and they will be plugged in at our office. So we will start deploying voting equipment the week before the election. So we have a pretty limited amount of time. So we're still in the testing phase, so they're on anyway right now, and we will continue getting everything ready through next week. We have to have everything packed up no later than October 28th to go out to the vote centers. So we're talking about this week and then next week to get those updates onto the electronic poll books.
Commissioner King.
Ms. Hargrove, you talked about deploying the voting equipment the week prior to the election. Who's going to maintain physical and cyber security of this voting equipment until the actual election day?
That's a great question, Commissioner King. So as I stated, they're actually in our office, and we put them in a charging cart that we lock. The chain of custody is still with my office in the room that they're stored in prior to the election.
Maybe my question wasn't clear. You talked about being out at the actual vote sites, vote centers, and everything else. That's kind of where I was heading with so your equipment's going out the week prior. And if your equipment's out there a week prior, who's maintaining security on that equipment, both electronically and physically, is where I was heading. Sorry, I wasn't clear enough.
Okay, I apologize. It is not plugged in at the vote centers, so it is deployed and sealed when we deploy them to the vote centers, and the facilities store them for us. We transfer that chain of custody, if you will, to that facility. They sign off, they tell us where it is stored, and then on the night before our election day, the poll workers will take the equipment in, do their Monday night setup, unlock it, unseal it, and do their testing. So it is not on during that period.
Okay, so you have a potentially broken chain of custody, even though it's sealed. It's out there, but there's not going to be anybody monitoring that equipment. There's no actual physical security on the equipment is what I'm getting at.
No, sir, there isn't any actual physical security, but we can actually see at our office through Precinct Central whether or not it's turned on or if anything has happened to the equipment prior to the election. So if anybody actually goes in, unlocks, if they wanted to go through that whole process, turn on a poll book, all they have to do is turn it on or create a point, and we can then see that.
Any,
Thank you, Director Hargrove. Sorry, just a little awkward. Just to kind of allay the public's fears, can you kind of go into to a little bit more detail about what that sealing process looks like? I know, when in my past experience, when we, in private sector, when we dismantle computers that have personal health information, we need to destroy hard drives. Can you just kind of talk us through a little bit about what that documentation process is like and give us a little insight to it, please?
Yes, sir, Commissioner Mays. So the electronic poll books, once they are complete, they are put into a case that is sealed, and then they're put into another container that is sealed prior to being delivered to the vote centers prior to Election Day. The inspectors are trained to check the seal numbers on the bag that they're in, the case that they're in. We know what the count of Delta files should be when we send them out. We know when the recorder finishes what they're doing, what that total Delta count is. We can see that. We can see that on any device that is opened and in operation. So we know when we send out these devices what's on them, the last time they were opened, and the Delta file count, which would be any update. So if anybody wanted to put an update on a tablet, let's say they wanted to do that, right, an iPad, we would be able to see that. So even though we do not have complete physical custody until Election Day, the information on the computers or the touchpads is in our custody because we are maintaining that, and the recorder's office maintains that.
any other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. The only other thing I left off of my update is poll workers, and we are almost there. I would have to throw my deputy under the bus to tell me exactly how many more vote centers we need poll workers in. However, I did want to just clarify. I mean, I understand there was the article or interview that was done gave the impression that I was somehow chastising the Republican Party for not having enough poll workers, and that absolutely is not the case. I've worked with all of the parties since I've been here, and there are people working behind the scenes every day in contact with my office from the parties, working to get poll workers for whatever location we need them in. There is no disconnect there. There is no reason for anyone to feel like we're trying to say, okay, you're not applying. There are people who have applied, but they're not in the right location, or they are not willing to go to a certain location, and understandably so. If you have to drive 2 hours to get to a voting location where you need to be there at 5 a.m., that means you're getting up probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to drive to a vote center, to be there 14, 15 hours, and then drive another 2 hours back home. You've spent an entire day trying to work the polls, and kudos to those who are volunteering to do that. I really appreciate that. We're still looking for a few more people, but I understand it is not easy. It is difficult to do that. So, the Board of Supervisors understands that. We will have conversations. We will make sure that they're adequately compensated for the time that they're spending going out to the vote center to serve their community. That's all I wanted to say.
Anybody else? I have a quick question, if my memory serves me correctly, and that's not always the case. You spoke to an increase in the number of judges at the voting centers, and at the primary election? Are we doing that same thing during the general election? And could you speak to that rationale, please?
Mr. Chair, yes, I did. Yes, so I'll just start from the beginning. So the requirements from the statute is that there be one inspector, one marshal, 2 judges, and as many clerks as we need to run a polling place. And with conversation with inspectors and staff, and the change from precinct-based voting, which you typically had just the one list of registered voters that you were working with, which was pretty easy for judges to control and maintain and watch over that in the ballots. With the change to the vote centers and the addition of electronic poll books, you now have more voter registration lists. Let's say we have more lists that we're working with, and the opportunity to print more than one ballot at a time because we have multiple poll books in a location now. So I made the decision to increase the number of judges in each vote center to address that situation, to make sure that there was oversight at each check-in table. So each check-in table has 2 judges, the judge of the same party as the inspector and the judge of the opposite party of the inspector. So instead of having just 2 judges there are multiple, minimum of 4 judges in these vote centers, unless it's a really, really small vote center. So there are a minimum of 4 judges, sometimes 6, sometimes 8 judges of opposite parties in the vote centers to maintain that oversight on Election Day.
So am I correct in stating that you have a JSP and a JOP for each e-poll book, essentially?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. Anything else before we move on? Commissioner King.
Yeah, Ms. Hargrove, thank you again for actually working with all the parties that are out there. That has been noticed, and it's something that actually wasn't accurately reported in the news. So, and I wanted to make that publicly known, that we do know that there are people working, from both sides of the party, or all sides of the parties, with your office to make sure that this is a fair election.
Last chance. And we do not have a representative of the Recorder's Office here today because they're in the middle of an active election, since they're doing the actual processing of the early ballots. One of the things, I won't say impressed, I was fascinated by the fact that the texting system that they've got now, and I don't know how much the elections department gets into the tail end of that, but getting a text that says, okay, we have your ballot, we've verified your signature, we've transferred it over to elections, and it's in batch number C3 and will be counted at the elections office. For people that are terribly concerned about whether their vote, now that doesn't mean your vote's necessarily going to be tabulated, but Commissioner Tellman, Commissioner King, and myself, I know, have all worked in the tabulation center, and it's a pretty tightly controlled environment. And for anybody else that wants something to do for a few days before and about a week after elections, it's a great opportunity to find out how the system works. Next item on the agenda was placed there by me. It says derogatory correspondence, and derogatory is probably not the right word, but it's the only one that came to mind at the time that I asked to have that item put on the agenda. Inflammatory or intimidating may be a better issue, and I understand in a highly charged political environment we don't always agree on all of the issues that are out there, but I would like to think that we can be cordial enough to agree to disagree and not to resort to ulterior motives. I can tell you that there was a letter received by the chair of all 15 Democratic parties, county parties in the state of Arizona. I don't know and can't speak to the fact that it was or wasn't received by their Republican counterparts as well. But it distressed me when I saw it. It's the kind of behavior I think is not going to help the situation get any better. And it says to Democratic Party members, Election party fraud will not be tolerated. All video and pictures of possible ballot voting and Dropbox fraud will be posted on the internet, along with pictures of district attorneys, sheriffs, and others that do not pursue investigations and charges on those committing election fraud. Copies of all evidence will be turned over to the local sheriffs. Retirees with nothing else to do will be filing hundreds of lawsuits, if not more. They will be locating your homes, your social media profiles, pictures, and posting them online as well. Every judge refusing to sentence election fraud to the full extent of the law will be considered a traitor and dealt with accordingly, as will you. That kind of language doesn't do a whole lot to foster safe, secure, free, and open and fair elections. I appreciate these people's right to fair speech and their opportunity to voice their opinion, but it's something that, as a private citizen and a member of this commission, concerns me greatly. So I just wanted that as part of the public record. Thank you. Mr. Laux, I did see your hand. We cannot correspond with you. We cannot converse with you as part of the meeting. Sorry, it's a violation of the open meeting law. We've been there once before, and we don't want to go there again.
Mr. Chairman, is it possible to get a copy of that letter so we can verify whether or not it's been sent to Republican Party officials as well?
It's addressed to Democrats.
Well, but if it's...
Sure.
Thank you.
You got it. Blanket observer credentials for commissioners to observe any and all vote centers. Commissioner King. You can have it.
Oh, I got a picture of it. Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a question I had. I didn't know if this was something that... I'm sorry. I didn't know if this is something that we could actually do, if this was something that we would do as a commission, or if this was something that we could have to do through our respective parties, have basically a letter to where the commissioners could go out and observe the election process at any vote center, vote site, if that's something that Ms. Hargrove would approve of as well. So it was just brought up more for discussion than anything else. Thank you.
Director Hargrove.
Mr. Chair, in looking at the statutes, do not have the authority to give anyone blanket approval to go to a vote center. However, observers, the party can give anyone the authority to go to as many vote centers as they want to. Of course, we still hold to the rule of only having one member of that party in each vote center. So if that is something that the parties want to do, then that is absolutely acceptable.
Commissioner Tillman.
The question for Mr. King, did you intend also to include blanket for commissioners to go to the ballot processing centers without going through their party?
No, this was going to go through the parties. I wanted to make sure that it was something that, I wasn't sure if it was something that we could actually do. It was not to work outside of the parties. It was actually something to work with the parties as well as the responsible agencies, responsible entities.
In this connection, I'd like to encourage all the commissioners to attend at least one session of ballot processing in the recorder's office and the elections department. And I believe we can do that as commissioners. Is that correct?
I'll pass on that one if you know something better than I do, Commissioner or Director Hargrove.
That is something I will have to confirm with the county attorney. I'm not clear on that.
We have had, and Commissioner King will verify this because he, myself, and his wife were in there as representatives, two from the Republican Party, one from the Democratic Party, because you don't want to throw somebody into the tabulation center that's never been there before and expect them to be able to function. And it's the way the party trains people to function in the tabulation center, but no more than two from any party. But usually one of them is a trainee or an observer, and one of them has been there before and knows what they're supposed to do. Because that is such a tightly controlled environment, it is difficult to get people in there for training because we have to unseal, log, and reseal the room in order to get in there.
Mr. Chair, yes, I do agree with you on that. When I said one individual, that was definitely vote centers. But for the tabulation room, we have had more than one of each party in there at a time, and while they were being trained.
Yeah, yeah. And a point I'd like to make is you can't have two people of the same party and count. You can't count ballots until you've got at least one Democrat and one Republican. Is that correct?
That is technically correct, yes.
Including a little bit of
We do have to have an observer in the room. However, there does come a point when we can't hold counting forever. So if you can't find someone to be in the counting room, that communication definitely needs to be made to the elections office so that we can adjust our schedule. We have a schedule, and the information is sent out to the parties to assign workers, observers, and if that cannot happen, that communication needs to happen with the elections office sooner rather than later.
I understand.
Actually, in the past, I believe we have had observers in the processing areas in their role of commissioner, not connected with the party. So could you look into that, whether that's possible? Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to second that. I personally would be interested, I think for my own edification, and I think, like we all said, it's a pretty integral part of understanding this process. So as a newer commissioner, I would be interested. Thanks.
Yes, I will definitely check on that.
And I know we worked in the city together, too.
Anything else on that agenda item? Next agenda item, voter center staffing adjustments based on data from the primary. Commissioner Hurley.
So this kind of goes back to Commissioner Director Hargrove was talking about. You added judges and personnel to the vote. Was that based on the adjustments, or did you make adjustments? Is that part of the adjustments that you made based on primary data? In other words, if you found that certain vote centers had high traffic, like Kirkbear Canyon apparently had a lot of traffic early on, and it was kind of backed up. So did you make adjustments to your staffing based on the primary data? And is there a report that shows what you did?
Commissioner Hurley, yes, I did make adjustments to some of the vote centers based on the August primary, not the initial two-judge conversation that we were having, but yes, because I increased equipment, and therefore I did increase the number of workers that would be in those vote centers. Is there a report of the allocation? Yes, there is a report of the allocation. Are you looking for a comparison or just a report of what I did for this election?
Just for this election.
Yes, I can definitely have Vanessa send it out to the commissioners.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Future agenda items. Anybody have anything that they'd like to see on next month's agenda? Commissioner King.
The canvas should be done by the next election, so that could something we could actually look at then.
Yeah. Well, you're shaking your head no.
Maybe.
Canvas is November 22nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a request that I be excused from the next meeting on the 18th, as we will be preparing the canvas.
I guess we'll let you do that. When is the actual canvas? Is it that following Monday?
The 22nd, is the 22nd a Monday? It's a special meeting.
It's on a Monday instead of a Tuesday.
Yes, so it would be, yes, whatever November 22nd is, it is definitely on that
Okay.
day.
And I would encourage any and all the commissioners that would like to go to the Board of Supervisors meeting and hear the report of the canvas. It may not be as exciting as you think it is, but it's a good practice. One of the things I'd like to see on next month's agenda is an evaluation of the security in the tabulation room. I'll leave that as broadly open as I can to facilitate discussion, but and then an after-action report on the general election as well, if you have one done by then.
I was going to request if we have a meeting in December, can it be for the December meeting? I know staff,
How
we will
close
not
is the
have.
schedule to meeting to Santa Claus's arrival?
Oh, we do not meet because Santa Claus is arriving? Okay. Okay, I will get as much done as I can by the next meeting, but it's kind of difficult when we're trying to prepare for the canvas.
We can keep an ongoing agenda item for discussions of the election, but I would like to see at least some initial analysis at the November meeting. And at the November meeting, we'll decide whether we want to meet in December or not. We may put it off until January.
Yes, sir, I can definitely do that. I do want to give the commission and parties a heads up that if there is a recount, because the law has changed, the numbers are lower where recounts can happen. So if there is a recount, we will be canceling Christmas. We will be we will be working on the recount. And just as a heads up, I just want to, if parties want to have a hand count after that recount, they need to alert their party members not to take off to other countries for Christmas, because we will need to have enough people there to do the recount if that is what they want to do.
You said the numbers that trigger a recount would be lower. Do you mean lower or higher?
They lowered the standard, the percentage. The legislature lowered the
but
percentage.
There used to be an absolute number regardless of the race. If the difference in the vote totals, I believe, was 200, it could trigger a recount regardless of the percentage, and that was to address smaller turnouts in more constricted fire districts, water districts, school districts, those kind of things, because they'd never trigger a recount with the percentages. So the percentage has come down, but I believe the actual number, regardless of the percentage, is 200. Has that changed as well?
I don't know for local if it's changed. I was really focusing more on the statewide offices and the legislative districts that we more than likely, there's a huge possibility that there could be recounts in those districts. But I will provide the exact information to you about recounts prior to the next meeting.
Thank you. Anything else that anybody knows? I know it's more than a week before the meeting, Lavoie, but
the only thing I'll just give Director Hargrove, I guess, a heads up here, because November will be obviously too soon to have much of an after-action report for the elections. But at some point, I think we are owed a more detailed report, including the cost comparisons to what was projected back when they did the proposal, back before you got here, I realized. But there were some costs that were said, hey, here's that's going to cost the county, or we're going to save money. And I think we are owed a comparison to say, did we save the money, or did we spend more money doing these things, and where was it spent? So that's a future. It's not for that, obviously, for November. Just giving you a heads up, though. We'll be asking for that. Probably January, probably, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say let's put it off till after the first of the year, because participation around the holidays tends to be spotty.
Agreed.
Yes, I was just informed that the November 22nd meeting is virtual, so nobody would be able to attend.
The Board of Supervisors meeting?
Yes, it is a virtual meeting.
Okay. So we can all be there.
Thanksgiving week,
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, future agenda items? Our next meeting is November 18th of 2022. Is that a problem for anybody? Do we need to move it? Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.